Three black men on the field. 9-11 because my cards are going straight for the towers. Oh, 300 black men for only £2. Yes!
This is Crusher21. He's a renowned and respected creator amidst the Clash Royale community, creating short and long form content that happens to be entertaining for some, yet draws scrutiny from others. His specialty of creating comedic content with dark humour infused into it has raised some eyebrows during this day and age, with boss_CR creating a video 2 months ago regarding how outrageous some of his content can be. Whilst it is true that Crusher21 jokes about some controversial things such as the Ocean Gate submarine, people being fathers, or calling hog riders black men, these jokes by themselves can seem innocent to some yet completely immoral to others, truly defining him as a polarising individual. However, these perceptions of Crusher21 are mere personal opinions, something I'll be trying to keep out of this video whenever possible. Before we begin a deep dive into how truly polarising he is, I must make the following clear. I am not here to hate against Crusher21. In fact, I have respect for this individual as a content creator and as a human being, and will uphold integrity throughout the making of this video. I am just here to examine their content, their demographics, and to truly answer the question of why Crusher21 is so polarising, and why so many individuals are split between supporting him as well as hating him. Without further ado, I proudly present to you Crusher21, Clash Royale's most polarising creator. Believe it or not, Crusher21 hasn't always been such a polarising force. He actually began quite like a lot of gaming channels back in 2019, which is where he would record himself commentating his gameplay whilst playing a mobile game known as Royale. His videos were simple, they were edited to a basic degree. It was your classic signs of someone who had just gotten into the business of being a gaming YouTuber for the first time and was just posting things for fun. One thing that was somewhat eye-catching about his videos though was how charismatic alongside funny he was. Even though he was still going through puberty, as judging by his voice at the time, people didn't care for the voice, nor did the content really amuse him all too much. They were more or less there for him, building up from his personality whilst he played Royale. There wasn't any inflammatory comments going on at the time, and if there were, it was usually era appropriate comments that weren't too remarkable in nature. It is unknown where some of its earlier content from 4 years ago has gone, considering Crusher21 has clearly made some of his past content private, yet his earlier days are virtually as clean as a whistle. His first 2 major videos that gained some traction were Royale in real life, where he was celebrating 1,000 subscribers, and a funny moments montage related to the game. It is unknown if the present success of these videos also highlights past success, but judging by the fact he had gained 1,000 subscribers within his first year of making YouTube videos, it was clear he was on a positive path. That was demonstrated even more so later down the line, once he made his 5,000 subscriber face reveal video and celebrated his success inside the video. Again, quite a remarkable feat for someone who had been making YouTube videos, especially YouTube videos that were more raw in nature as opposed to being heavily edited in such a competitive atmosphere. It was clear that Crusher21 knew what he was doing back then. The personality he had for the gaming was there, people found him extremely funny, he clearly had a strong interest in the game that happened to be Royale, considering his channel was themed around this game for a solid 2 years before he began to shift his content towards Clash Royale, later releasing a short video on October 29th, 2021, where he briefly went over how unskilled his rush deck was, which involved Lumberjack as well as elite barbarians rushing a tower to claim them quickly and advance through the game's ladder. It was an extremely unremarkable video in of itself, but it was extremely significant in the fact that it was Crusher21's first Clash Royale video. Yet, it was clear that Crusher21 had yet to develop that extremely over-enthusiastic personality that he's now infamous for, considering he would soon release his first short revolving around him opening up a chest in hopes of acquiring a champion. Inside of his earlier content, he was often calm and collected. He had a basic idea of what he was doing and his commentary was entertaining without the need to exaggerate almost every single sentence to the point where it's being yelled. However, this video would signify an aforementioned shift in his content, away from Royale, with his last video on the game being made roughly a year and a half ago at the point of making this video, as well as him shifting away from overused concepts such as emotes in real life towards something a lot more organic and something he enjoyed doing, which was making Clash Royale videos. Yet his big break didn't come up until he made a video revolving around dissing the Mega Knight, a parody video if you will. The video did tremendously well, and it was coupled with the fact that some of his YouTube shorts, albeit basic concepts at the time, began garnering thousands of subscribers with pretty much each upload upload. Naturally, not all ideas caught on, but that's to be expected when you're growing your channel. He will further this with a compilation video on YouTube revolving around his shorts, with level 15 troops going against level 1 troops demonstrating the interactions. Who knew he could predict the future and fate of the game 2 years later with such a concept, as the video would garner over 3 million views. This crushed some of the shorts that he had uploaded in performance at the time, and respectively, this video ended up with a massive wave of success coming his way. But this wasn't the only video that he made that garnered success. Well, not only was a video entitled Day in the Life of an E-Bar Player not only successful as a parody but also extremely funny, demonstrating Crush's wittiness, a much larger concept that managed to push him roughly over 100,000 subscribers at the time was a simplistic concept of different Clash Royale troops having group chats and talking to one another, and it's actually how I found Crusher 21 myself. On the other hand, his personality was clearly beginning to change. It was becoming less calm and collected and more hyperactive. Whether that be the fact that he was breaking out of his YouTuber shyness shell after all these years, or a change that was made to draw in a bigger audience, is still a mystery that eludes time to this day. With an incoming tsunami of success came adapting to your audiences, and his audience happened to be filled with most of the younger members of the Clash Royale community who found his infectious personality alongside his concepts and ideas relatively hilarious. Accompanying this success, however, was a slow descent into more controversial topics, ideas as well as comments being thrown around by Crusher 21. Although unproblematic at the time, it was clear that some of his behaviour was starting to shift into shadier territory, where darker jokes could be made and shared with his audience, of which they would find it funny thanks to that naturally younger demographic. Of course, when you're slightly younger, you're inclined to find dark humour and controversial things funny. Heck, I do to this very day, as I'm a teenager myself still. Yet this shift started to turn some heads as well as raise some eyebrows amidst the Clash Royale community and the creator space more generally. A creator who was thought to be once amidst a million was now blowing up thanks to a combination of YouTube shorts being posted alongside video concepts that were borrowed from other creators. My biggest example of this was the fact that the group chat with Clash Royale troops were actually borrowed from a language channel known as Lingualizer, featuring countries in the group chat that ended up going viral. However, with his size growing, he could no longer afford to take direct inspiration from other creators. It was time for him to carve his own path, his own niche, as well as to use his own personality to deliver content that had never been seen before. While some would take a more inventive approach, Crusher 21 decided to take the route not many at the time had considered, and that was creating content which involved controversial comments, out-of-pocket remarks, as well as a truly polarising perspective regarding how he projects his own humour onto his audience. One of the first issues that popped up regarding Crusher 21's shifting content style was the obvious fact that he was drawing a much younger and more enthusiastic audience whilst letting off these out-of-pocket comments. Let it be made clear that yes, dark humour does exist. Everyone could take a joke every now and again. Yeah, there comes a point where sometimes dark humour can drown in irony before eventually spiralling into indirect influence on that audience. Whether it be indirectly condoning racism or referencing tragic events, there will naturally be people out there who will agree with this humour, whilst others will disagree, and people such as myself will remain neutral regarding the matter. Life cannot be all doom and gloom, but it's the question of whether or not telling these jokes to a young and impressionable audience is a good idea that is often thrown around the table. Now, boss_CR made a now infamous video speaking about the matter and how this dark humour could influence a young and impressionable audience. Yes, it's clear that young audiences will often parrot what they hear their favourite content creators speak about without knowing too much about it, but there's only so much that can be done. Age could often be a limiting thing regarding maturity, and many people only discover through experience as to the potential foolishness that repeating these jokes can bring. On one hand, discussing things such as jokes revolving around the Twin Towers collapsing with a bunch of 12-year-olds isn't such a good idea, but their decision to repeat it and later learn about it is another question entirely. I know you're not here for a lesson in philosophy or morals coming from a furry. I am still extremely aware that these jokes can influence an audience in a harmful manner. Yet then we wrap back around to the dark humour and the fact it's often opinionated regarding whether it's an ethical way to jape or in a moral way to joke around. This question mixing with the obvious to the impressionable audience is up for interpretation, but as a content creator, there is a degree of responsibility that you must uphold regarding what you share with your audience whilst considering the consequences of some of these actions. Not everyone's cut from the same cloth, and it's clear that some people will simply have the maturity to move on from the remarks they deem abrasive, while others will stick around to laugh with Crusher 21. But to neglect the obvious fact that sharing these jokes with such an impressionable audience, even an audience so new that they might not understand the jokes but laugh at them anyways, is a slight oversight by Crusher 21, and I'm not going to deny that. It is clear that everyone has their own opinions on the matter, and and everyone enjoys their own thing. Yet over time, his branding has become much less about the content he creates and more about the personality he has, which involves the jokes being caught in the crossfire. This very example in of itself is what I mean by Crusher21 being extremely polarizing. There is not such a binary answer whenever you consider neutral sides and both sides to the same coin. Whilst one person will condone the use of these sometimes abrasive and inoffensive jokes, another will condemn it. It's a simple matter of sensitivity and susceptibility that breeds an atmosphere filled with endless controversy. I doubt every mother wishes for their younger child to listen to jokes revolving around the Twin Towers, the Ocean Gate submarine, or open-handedly dropping a censored yet prevalent M-bomb inside of one of your thumbnails to gain the attention of that young audience, but children are naturally rebellious, and so are young teens. Some will eventually figure out that these jokes are not for them and that they're wrong, at least in their minds, whilst others will enjoy and see the humour in it. It's the matter of these jokes being repeated that happens to be the concern of most of the Clash Royale community. Dark humour can admittedly be funny at times. I'm sure almost all of us out there have laughed about something and have regretted it later. It's not the jokes themselves that really irk people, it's the fact that the content of these jokes can be repeated by a naive audience that draws everyone's concern. I know as someone who has a controversial profile picture on YouTube that will most likely have a few people in the comment section who wish to express their opinions that these jokes are funny or that I'm cringe and I'm doing something wrong by highlighting these facts. But you cannot deny the fact that children repeating some of these more outrageous jokes and spreading them to their friends isn't such a sanitary idea, nor are these jokes a positive association to hold if you're a content creator. Today's society is admittedly a lot more sensitive than it once was, but it's all about regulation. If Crusher21 had an older audience, I'm sure that a lot of people would be more tolerant of these jokes, but that's the main problem. A lot of these jokes don't typically sit well with a more mature audience, it's just not funny to them. The humour itself is there, and even the tone, but the more mature you become in life, the more your humour shifts towards slightly mature things. That also includes the fact that dark humour is often eliminated in exchange for more witty and practical jokes about the present. Spreading this sort of humour to a young and impressionable audience can only last so long, not only as a content creator but more generally. Once your audience begins to grow up, and trust me, it happens with almost every content creator that has created content for more than 2 years, a lot of people begin to realise that the things that were once funny are just simply cruel or outrageous to really forge jokes out of. People of all ages are allowed to enjoy whatever they wish. Content creators are technically allowed to make whatever they wish to make, but a lack of consideration for your audience and responsibility regarding your demographics can carry consequences later on. I don't want to see Crusher21 face any consequences. I don't think anyone does, considering cancel culture and cancelling in general is mostly used for negative purposes, but if there is one thing that needs to be done, it's Crusher21 acknowledging accountability. Acknowledging the fact that these jokes aren't the best way to relate to a young and flourishing audience. Taking accountability for the fact that you've learned from this and have moved on. It has been 2 months since boss_CR made his Crusher21 video, and not much has changed regarding Crusher21's formatting of content, as demonstrated by this now deleted thumbnail featuring the Twin Towers and a word I cannot say on YouTube. Managing an impressionable audience is one thing as a growing creator. Ignoring how to manage the audience and instead refusing to take accountability, going all in on your jokes as they become increasingly inflammatory the more your channel grows in size, will only go so far, until people either catch on to the fact that these jokes are going too far, or the fact that your audience may mature during that time and realise that these jokes weren't funny as they once were. Speaking of accountability though, we now land in the present, where our polarisation truly reaches its peak regarding the fact that there's a clear divide between people who find Crusher21's content entertaining as opposed to those who do not. Now that we've encompassed Crusher21's remarkable rise to stardom, as well as the issues that plague some of his more controversial jokes mixing with his impressionable audience, we land in a place divided by opinions spread around the internet. Across YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Reddit and other places, it is undeniable, regardless of the accountability of such sources, that Crusher21's content has drummed quite a polarised opinion as to himself as a content creator. Whilst most rifts and opinions are caused by something sudden, this has all been caused by a slow build-up of increasingly inflammatory jokes that has left everyone divided as to what to feel regarding Crusher21. Naturally, there are probably those even inside of this comment section of this video defending him, but I will be taking a look at both sides of the argument here alongside which points they may present. A perfect example of an argument against Crusher21's style of content would be boss_CR's video about him, and how there needs to be a discussion opened about him and his content. In that video, he discussed multiple points of failure in a relatively critical manner as to the fact that Crusher21's jokes may be indirectly fostering some harmful behaviour, that these young and impressionable audience members of his may end up taking taking out on their surroundings. Not only that, I think it should be mentioned that Crusher21 directly took accountability inside of the comment section, only to skip over it a few months later when the dust had settled to create a thumbnail and video subject that I've mentioned once already. I think it is important those arguments are taken into account regarding how this rift amidst the community formed into a chasm filled with personal opinions and perceptions. Boss_CR expressing his personal opinion on the matter as someone mature obviously influenced many people and made them aware of the current situation regarding Crusher21, turning people against him respectively thanks to the shocking nature of some of the things discussed in that video. Many people went on to call him immature, inconsiderate, even foolish for not considering his audience or his demographics, while others came to his defense, claiming that his jokes were funny and the internet had become extremely insensitive to his content. A prime example of polarization between those who believe that these jokes and references are acceptable as opposed to those who do not. Another example of the argument for Crusher21's sense of humour comes in the form of Crusher21 fanbase itself. The demographics itself cannot say everything. There will always be people who define mere statistics, and that goes to show within the cult of personality some of his fans harbour whenever coming to his defence whenever a content creator of any size criticises him. I'm probably going to be introduced to that part of the audience, but criticism or hate isn't the end of the world for me. This fanbase has skyrocketed to an exceptionally large size throughout the last year, and obviously there comes a variety of opinions, but when you're a fan of a creator, you tend to look through some of the obvious moral dilemmas and come to the conclusion relatively quickly that Crusher's way of entertaining people is coming under threat. Thanks to sensitive people, and a defensive reaction can even prove someone's point regarding their disinterest in his way of making videos or the jokes that are made in regards to how much threat they might cause. Some of these people simply do not care about the nature of the jokes that are being told. They are there for the entertainment themselves as well as Crusher himself. Furthermore, this obvious demographic gap between those who are older and those who do not enjoy Crusher's content and see it as controversial, as opposed to those who are younger and simply do not care or think it's funny, opens up the chasm of polarization further, considering there's an obvious maturity gap too. The reason as to why Crusher21 is so polarizing to begin with is because he walks a fine line between entertainment as well as controversy. There are simply people out there who will not enjoy his content because of the controversial theme and jokes that are cracked, whilst other people are drawn to it like metals to magnets. He is so large as a creator to the point where the controversy can sometimes outweigh the consequences. Of course, you cannot be a creator and simply avoid consequences because you're a juggernaut regarding entertainment, yet it makes those consequences much less threatening, creating a perception of false invincibility, and therefore makes controversy much more appealing as a content form. Thankfully, a lot of these jokes have been somewhat tolerable, and the reaction to these jokes has truly demonstrated how much variety exists inside the Clash Royale's community as well as society itself. My personal worry is that the threat of consequences will be overpowered by the appeal of controversy itself and the willingness to go from relatively innocent yet controversial jokes to straight up harmful and controversial jokes and remarks. The now edited thumbnail mentioned in the previous chapter is a massive example of that. Boss_CR mentioned how that Crusher's 21 jokes are becoming increasingly horrible in nature. Crusher then took accountability for these jokes, apologised and told people that he would be much more considerate, only to end up posting something like that. It's a perfect example of a lesson that has yet to be learned from it, and I sincerely hope that Crusher learns in due time that consideration and accountability is key to creating content, not being the most controversial figurehead amidst the Clash Royale community or a community in general. The circumstances Crusher has found himself in is quite frankly dangerous. No content creator should need to walk such a tedious and fine line between entertainment and potentially threatening their career. Yet it's more important that you minimise the risk of threatening your career by instead of being more authentic as opposed to opting for controversial subjects and jokes inside of your videos. As discussed in the beginning of this video, Crusher's content was never like this. It was more authentic and creative back a year and a half ago in spite of his small size. At least some of it was, considering there are some obvious inspirations. Being a controversy magnet isn't the best way to keep your career afloat, that's for sure. The best way for Crusher to end this polarization is for him to be a little more transparent and to bridge the gap regarding whether people are there for him or there for the controversial jokes, unless negative press is the thing keeping his career afloat, which I hope it isn't. An audience that feeds on controversy is never an audience that you wish to harbour. The same goes for an audience that enjoys the covering of trends. There's only so much growth that can happen until you reach a slump and begin appealing to nobody as opposed to everyone. Negative press in the short term may be beneficial, but in the long term it becomes career regicide. On that note, it's time to leave you all my personal thoughts, and if you don't want to hear them, feel free to click off the video now. Whilst I don't see the current jokes or events as the end of Crusher21's career, it's clear that something needs to be done before his career ends up going down the latrine all in the name of clicks and controversy. Accountability must be taken. There are lessons that you need to be learned and ideas to be held that aren't themed around these jokes. At the end of the day, I do know everything about Crusher21. He lives his own life free of content creation, and I'm sure as an entertainer, he is not pure evil and instead is a wonderful human being who only makes his jokes for his audience and not for himself. He must break free from the cycle and separate himself from his audience whilst creating things that he really wishes to enjoy. It may cause a decrease in interest indirectly or directly. Influencing children with these jokes is not a mature way to go about being a content creator. It would be a much more mature decision to instead take accountability, putting trust inside of his audience to be loyal as well as mature, and that would be a much better decision in the long run. That way his career has a lot more longevity than some of the frozen food inside of my freezer. Crusher, if by any chance you're watching this, you've got this. You've still got a strong audience willing to defend you regardless of which decision you make. It's about letting go of that Crusher controversy and embracing the loyal arms of your fanbase who will thrive without such comments, considering your wit can outlast any joke that will expire in a month. As for the rest of you, I have presented both the argument and counter argument and covered Crusher 21's achievements and career. If you'd like to have a conversation about it in the comment section, feel free to drop it down below. This has been Nader by presenting Crusher 21, Clash Royale's most polarizing creator. Thank you all for watching, take care, and may the cosmos shine upon you.